In today's episode of the LoCo Experience podcast, I welcome back Clint Jasperson, founder and managing partner of Purpose Driven Wealth, a Thrivent Financial wealth management office. Clint has been a member of LoCo Think Tank for nearly 5 years and shared in part the blessing of his membership as a safe place for diverse opinions, rather than the crazies yelling at each other from the corners of the internet. Clint and I spoke more about mindset than toolkit in this one, and especially how we can reconcile our heart math with our pencil math, with intentional conversation and reflection. We also touched on how a planning office can add the most value to a conversation far ahead of a liquidity event, i.e. the sale of a business, and how protection and wealth building must both be considered, and what the next chapter of growth looks like for his business. He's a philosopher, not just a CFP, and I'm thankful to have Purpose Driven Wealth as a sponsor of the LoCo Experience podcast. Clint faces down his very own purpose-driven questions segment in this one like a pro, so tune in and enjoy my conversation with Clint Jasperson. Welcome to the LoCo Experience podcast. On this show, you'll get to know business and community leaders from all around Northern Colorado and beyond. Our guests share their stories, and through it all, you'll be inspired and entertained. These conversations are real and raw, and no topics are off limits. So pop in a breath mint and get ready to meet our latest guest. Welcome back to the LoCo Experience podcast. My guest today is a returning guest, Clint Jasperson. Third time on the show? We had 2 times, right, so far?
2 or 3 times. I can't remember.
Okay.
We talk so much, deep talks.
Well, we do. I mean, when we have a 5-minute phone call, it turns into a 27-minute phone
Always,
call. That is true.
Always.
Clint is a certified financial planner, Board of Standards Center for Financial Planning, Inc., owns and licenses the certification marks CFP, Certified Financial Planner, and CFP with plaque design in the United States to Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. Listeners, you can fast forward for another 30 seconds or so, which authorizes individuals who successfully complete the organization's initial and ongoing certification requirements to use certification marks. Thrivent and its financial advisors and professionals do not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. Consult your tax attorney or tax professional. Thrivent provides guidance and advice through its financial planning framework that it generally includes a review and analysis of a client's financial situation. A client may choose to further their planning engagement with Thrivent through its dedicated planning services and investment advisory service that results in written recommendations for a fee. Thrivent is the marketing name for Thrivent Financial for Lutherans. Insurance products issued by Thrivent, not available in all states. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Thrivent Investment Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC, and a subsidiary of Thrivent. Thrivent.com/disclosures.
Incredible job.
That's my favorite part of preparing for this. I actually switched up. I said guidance and advice instead of advice and guidance. Do you think that matters?
It might, but I think you're okay.
Maybe
I think your intent was good and it's clear.
Okay. Clint is a former colleague. We were peers when I was a Thrivent representative, circa 2015. I guess. Yeah, 2015, late 2015. After my members at LoCo Think Tank said, "Bear, you need to park that stupid food truck in your backyard and go get a job."
Yeah. Yep.
And you were the younger than most of us, but kicking our asses in all the production quotas and stuff not quotas per se, but results.
I've been very fortunate. I have had a lot of people trust my advice and stick with us. Yeah. And they've benefited and we've benefited.
Yeah, your advice has been sound. Because, frankly, you they spent a lot of time when I was at Thrivent trying to help me believe I was called into this industry and craft and stuff, and they told everybody that.
Yeah, sure.
But you kind of were.
Yeah, it is a calling for sure. At least it has been for me.
And what I really enjoy is that you've retained a lot of humility. You've been through a ton of complex transactions. Sometimes humility is forced upon us in ways that we didn't foresee.
Amen. Yeah.
And but you've eaten that humble pie with grace and become stronger and wiser.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You've gotten to see a lot of it, so that means a lot. Thank you.
Well, and thanks also for longtime membership in LoCo Think Tank and for sponsoring the purpose-driven segment of our podcast.
Purposeful questions.
Hopefully
people enjoy those. Give us feedback. Let us know. But,
it's been really interesting. My most recent guest, even, I he didn't want to talk about politics or anything divisive kind of thing. And then when we got into one of your purpose-driven questions, he really unfolded about his faith journey and how important. And he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and we had a number of Seventh-day Adventists in my community that were farmers and stuff, and it was kind of mysterious to me. And it's kind of like they have eating codes that are different. It's not just the Saturday church thing, but he really unfolded on all of that, and it just really surprised me. And I don't think I would have went there with him because without that question there to prompt. And
yeah, I think a lot of our culture, there's a number of sensitive topics. And ironically enough, there's a paradox or a tension that exists where people want to have, I'll call it intimacy, where they feel deeply known and yet don't feel that they have the permission to be vulnerable or the safety to be vulnerable in expressing areas that other people might disagree with. And my personal observation is this, having seen a lot of people inside of client meetings express a lot of the same views, but maybe have 20% differences. The vast majority of people have the capacity to appreciate other people's differences and have conversation reasonably, and I would say in an overall loving way, and yet we're discouraged from doing that sometimes based on the loud signal on the internet,
that noisy
from the bullies,
10%,
and or
noisy
exactly.
5% of actual. Most people have the ability to kind of relate and understand that people have different journeys and whatever, different perspectives. How's that changed for you since becoming a member at LoCo Think Tank? Or was it already kind of baked into the pie and that was a place to see it expressed more?
Honestly, one of my favorite parts of LoCo Think Tank is the ability to have, meaningful, deep conversation with peers that can relate a lot to the same challenges. Whether we agree or not in terms of a lot of other things, there's a lot of commonality. As an example, I'm Christian. My faith is important to me. My theological worldview informs a lot of who I am. And at the same time, there are plenty of other LoCo members that make very value-oriented decisions inside of their business.
And highly ethical,
et cetera. And so we can find common ground on that to have conversation about and navigate moral dilemmas, because as a business owner, there's ultimately multiple stakeholders that you're trying to balance as you try to offer the value proposition to the world. So it's been fun to navigate that. I would also say there's been times where I would hope I've been helpful in at least healing. Inevitably, most people have been hurt by someone that's religious, whether it's an institution or a person. And so there have been times where people have appreciated my willingness to sort of go there and respond in a loving way. And my hope would be that it makes them curious. And maybe that's the Lord working through me. Who knows?
I dig it.
Yeah.
I dig it. Well, we do have a bit of a framework. Sure. That we submitted to make sure Thrivent would be okay.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll chase a lot of squirrels as well. But
amen.
It starts really with a proper introduction, since you're, the last time you were on the show was quite a while ago, and the first time when you really introduced yourself was, 4 years ago plus.
Yeah, I was one of your earlier guests.
Yeah, second year maybe or something like that. So talk a little bit about that journey for you, both education-wise and then especially finding your kind of pathway into the investments world with Thrivent. Yeah, so there's the how I found myself here, and then in hindsight, maybe the footsteps in the sand of why I think I'm here. The how is I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, literally in a log cabin, and enjoyed that way of life. I went to school at the University of Wyoming, got my bachelor's degree, and I was considering, and I studied psychology. I spent some time in the School of Business, and I had an interest in going and getting my MBA, and I applied to various schools. At the time, Wharton was a top school, Harvard was a top school, but they were all really expensive. And there were no merit-based scholarships for people in my, I wasn't like a 4.2 GPA, which you kind of need at that space. And it was also relatively early for like younger MBAs to going in. And so I was looking at the cost of that, a couple $100,000 at that time. This is right around the 2008 financial, it was 2007, no one was hiring. And I knew that I didn't want to go into debt the size of a mortgage that I couldn't live in. Especially into an uncertain economy. Yeah. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what was going on. And so
I had a mentor of mine that encouraged me to go get my master's in education, where, his sort of pitch to me was, you'll get all the leadership training you would get in school. You'll be way better at working for people, and you'll get some of the business experience because you'll essentially get insight in how to run a 30,000 person organization where you have students as customers, et cetera. And there were parts of that were very true about that experience, and I'm very thankful for it. It was also, it really broadened my horizons because as a guy that grew up in rural Wyoming, I had some hardships. We'll talk about how that transitioned into my why I think I'm doing what I'm doing. But I just wasn't exposed to a lot of things outside of my worldview,
Real
right?
grown-up people.
So exactly. Or just like even, like I would say there's a little bit of like a Latino population in Wyoming because there's agricultural industry there.
Okay.
But I just hadn't been exposed to a lot of perspectives different than mine. And so ironically enough, there were things like cultural conversations like pluralism, et cetera, that were really appealing and broadened my intellectual rigor in terms of thinking through and having empathy for different perspectives. All that to say, I also knew that like while I loved the heart side of that, I didn't really want to do that for a living coming out of it. And for a brief period so prior to that, I had weighed about 250 pounds, chewed tobacco, just not living my good life.
Ate unhealthy, drank way too
much. In early college years, I really prided myself on how much I could drink, which is, that's just a sad truth.
You're total lightweight now.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have like one drink and I'm like, I'm tired. Or like, we were talking earlier, I have still getting over laryngitis, which is the first time. And it's like my throat's still dry and I cough randomly, even though I don't have a cold or whatever. But all that to say, I got my master's degree at the University of Vermont, which is a very different environment in many ways from Wyoming. Came back to the state of Wyoming briefly. I had wrote up this business idea. This was right around the time of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, et cetera. And I saw an opportunity where I believed that health insurance companies were going to need to take and had an opportunity to take responsibility for trying to help encourage the folks that they serve, the insured folks, get healthier. And so I wrote up this business idea. It was adopted, and it was really a behavioral intervention protocol, we'll call it, to enable people to make better decisions.
Yeah.
Because
I remember I was in banking at the time, and there was a lot of initiatives, not just within our organization, but, gym membership things and people coming in and talking to us about just simple things you can do to be healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that beyond just the informational side of that, most people self-actualize through relationship in these domains of self-actualization. Finance is one of them. That's how I found myself there. Health is one of them. Marital relationship is one of them. Friendships are one of them. There's just all these domains that where I think that my belief is that for the most part, God didn't design us to self-actualize on our own. That's the gift of our vulnerability. And, if you're coping with sin or just fallibility, the beauty is like it gives you the ability to be vulnerable in that and say, I need help. I am better with others. Yeah. And so I saw that that idea took off. It was very successful. Oh, go ahead.
When was your health journey? Like you were a chubby kid going into college, got bigger, and then like did you get like put on the hat? I'm going to be Mr. Fit now.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Well, oddly enough, I think that a couple things converged in hindsight. The first was I wanted to be healthier, and I'd started taking steps towards that. And like a typical guy in college, I was interested in dating, and I noticed that I was not enjoying most of the relationships that most of the women that I encountered at the bar. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why am I showing up here? What do I actually like doing? I like going to coffee shops. I like reading. I like deep discussions. I play the guitar. And I start showing up at open mic nights, and I realized that one of the realizations was part of the reasons why I was drinking alcohol was because it made it easier to meet somebody. And so and I met somebody that was less interested in those experiences, which then I'm like, oh, great. So I learned how to snowboard. And I think in my senior year of college, because I saved my PE credit that I had to do for my last semester, I snowboarded like 25 times as a satisfying PE credit, right? And so it was in hindsight, interesting because I'd sort of started that work before.
Yeah.
I also entered a romantic relationship that helped with that. And I was going through this existential questioning of, okay, what happens when I graduate? Who do I want to be, et cetera? And I think all of those things, that with trying to quit tobacco, chewing tobacco specifically, which I think about now is like so gross. But there was a period of time where for like years afterwards, if someone was chewing and I would like salivate.
See the can in the back of their pocket.
Yeah,
now
I'm like, oh God, it's so gross. And I'm
good.
I'm thankful. So that
I've always thought it was gross, but
yeah, I mean that's a rational thought. So at any rate, I kind of went through that towards the latter stage of my.
Well, I imagine if you turn off the spigot on the alcohol consumption and the bad food choices, and turn up the spigot on working out, walking, snowboarding 3 times a week.
Yeah.
The weight melts right off you pretty quick in those days.
Well, it definitely makes it easier, right? Because there's all these things that converge. And, I'd say at my worst, there was a period of time where I would drink, oh man, this is embarrassing, but like a case of 40s throughout the week and then a case of 40s over the weekend. And I was proud to brag about that.
Cases 12 or 24?
12.
Okay.
That's a lot either way.
That's a lot.
That's a lot either way, right?
Yeah,
and
that's like 2 a night.
Oh my God, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I look back at that and I'm like, it's wild, my perspective, right? And the ironic thing was my dad was an alcoholic and he passed away. Part of how he passed away was that. So it's ironic that even though I had a lot of anger and all these other kind of things toward him, I was on a self-destructive path to sort of repeat that until making some of these changes. And a lot of, again, looking backward, there were people in my life that really extended me the benefit of the doubt or believed in me when I couldn't or helped me kind of maintain upward aim. That's actually one thing that's different. I joined a fraternity. Criticize fraternities all that you want, but like I would not have become the man I am today without men in there choosing to believe and help remind me to maintain upward aim despite my circumstances. And that is one thing that I think is different about fraternities or men versus women's sororities, at least at that time, which was men would look at a guy and see his potential and they would try to bring him up. Whereas a lot of women, it's like, oh, if they don't at least meet this minimum standard. And so that's a fascinating
but don't
side
be better
topic.
than me.
Right, yeah. There's a whole other thing there, right? It's just but I thought that was really interesting. And I still observe that about men today. Men, no one really, as a side topic, we could go in many ways. I need to continue answering your question. But
You're good.
if a man is helpless, no one really comes to help that man except for other men. And I think that that's a tremendous privilege and a responsibility as other men. Because, if a woman is helpless, you've got men and women that will kind of step in. And same thing with children. Chris Rock has a bit about, I think it's Chris Rock, who's like, the only people that get unconditional love is women and children. My biblical perspective on that is like we all have unconditional, worth as human beings.
Sure.
But it's just this interesting challenge as a man. So anyway, went through all that stuff, health transformation, was exiting out of my master's degree, knew I didn't want to go into that. Had some personal life experience that I reflected on, built this business plan. It was adopted by a local health insurance company. I was there for about 9 to 12 months. The short answer of why I left was that right as I started, a new leadership stepped into place. And within the first 2 weeks, he sat me down and he's like, I don't believe in anything that you're doing. And he's like, you have to, in order for you to convince me, you have to meet these outlandish goals. And only then will I support you. And then I met the goals and he just kept moving the goalposts. And so I think in my short tenure there, within 9 months, it was about a 48-person organization. There was an employee turnover of new employees and prior employees of 22 when I left. Wow. So almost 50% turnover of existing and people he hired. That was the environment.
Almost everybody, when they leave a job, it's to leave a boss.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like 75% of departures.
Yeah, it's a leadership issue usually. Yeah. Yep, for sure. So anyway, long story short, did that. Then I was recruited down to Cigna. I did employer benefits consulting, worked with Taft-Hartley trust funds. They have like they'll pool all this money together in Taft-Hartley trusts to self-insure with their health insurance or put money into pensions. And I was kind of working on the business to business side.
Sorts,
exactly. Yep. Did that for a period of time. Had even this person that I referenced before, like he was just an older guy that we just didn't agree on where the future was. That's fine. I ended up getting a new boss. I was there for a year, excelled, was promoted several times. And then I got a new boss in a division who I don't think I've ever met anybody in a professional setting that was literally narcissistic or didn't have a conscience. And it was so bad that like he was recommending that I do things unethical and I just couldn't do it. And yet I was having panic attacks at work, and I was like, I got to get out of here.
Do you want to mention this person's name?
No,
Okay.
it's okay.
It's like, don't do it.
I think they've since been, they might even be barred from the industry at the time, but anyway, I just had to get out. And at the time, I just remember thinking, this isn't the way it should be. If it is, I'm not cut out for the business world.
Right.
And my then girlfriend, but now wife, Lindsay, had experience with Thrivent. So she was an advisor there. Her pastor, Don Johnson, he transitioned out of being a pastor, was an advisor for a bit. She tried a year or two out of college there. She did really well for being a young woman that launched during the financial crisis.
Right.
But she ended up going to work at HP in technology sales after that experience, and she still had wonderful things to say.
Guaranteed upper 5-figure income with great benefits and stuff.
Yeah,
maybe you'll make 40 next year.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but she had nothing but positive things to say, and so she connected me to the organization. In addition to her pastor growing up, who's a close family friend still to this day. And I honestly would not, I knew I was going to go lean towards financial services, but I would not have even considered going to Thrivent without those two people. So.
And were you down in Northern Colorado for these prior stages? Or
No,
you came
so
down here
I
for
was
that,
in Wyoming for a year after graduate school, and then I was in Denver for, call it, 2 years.
Okay.
And I actually was considering starting the practice there in Denver, but my wife's father passed away a week after we got engaged. So relocated up to Northern Colorado, moved in with her mom.
Wow.
For 9 to 12 months after her dad passed away, and that just decided that it was worth planting the flag up here. And so the rest is kind of history in terms of just being in Northern Colorado since then.
Did you, growing up in a log cabin and then, Cheyenne and then Denvertown, do you ever regret that you had to leave Denvertown? Did you like the flash and the lights?
Yeah, I mean, I think Denver's fun as a dink, dual income, no kids. We are, interestingly enough, I was fortunate enough to have saved up some money. I lived very humbly when I was a bachelor, and so I had saved up some money to buy a condo in a neighborhood called Jefferson Park. At the time I bought a condo there was someone that had literally been shot and died in that park. But for me as a bachelor, I was like, I need a place to live. This is cheap. It's close to where I'm, downtown area. And I bought it at literally the bottom. I think it was like to the month, maybe even the day of the Denver market.
Right.
So we still own that. We rented it out for a couple of years, but just recently we've decided to turn it over for personal use so that when we go down there with our kids, we did this over spring break this year for a couple of days. We went down there, we did the Denver Zoo, etc.
Yeah.
I don't miss Denver, but there are parts of it that are offered that way, especially with two young girls. I mean, I was walking around and I definitely my dad sort of husband, I will protect my tribe vibe is definitely elevated in those settings because there are sketchy scenarios. And so I don't want that at all for them, but there's ways to access that, so.
Fair. Mm-hmm. So what was that first introduction to Thrivent? You just
I had breakfast with my wife's former pastor, who since became a mentor for me. And it's funny, at the end of it, he kind of basically convinced me that I wasn't a good fit for it. And I just remember thinking, I thought he was going to oh, you'd be great, etc. And he actually came back and he's like, yeah, it's really, really hard. Most people flame out, they can't do it. So, you probably shouldn't try. And I think in hindsight, he didn't say it that directly, but I just remember being like, that was really strange. But I think he just felt a responsibility to be honest with me about how difficult it can, and it is.
Hard.
It is very difficult. And
I flamed out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. You almost have to be delusional to try because of the statistics, right? So for someone to look at the statistics and say 80% of people that start off trying to do and build their own thing are going to fail out of the industry, but I'm going to be the exception. Right. Whether it's grandiosity or immaturity or just foolhardiness.
And for you,
believe that.
You had a wife with a decent income. Mm-hmm. You were accustomed already to living humbly so that you could save and stuff like that. You'd been demonstrating, and you had a why, and we haven't really touched on your why too much.
Yeah, so I'd say the why. Thank you for circling back there. So I'll respond to two parts of that. One financial principle that I would encourage as it relates to risk taking, if you're younger, if you can learn to live on very little, your ability to be aggressive with your time and conviction for the financial resources that you do have when you need to pivot. I think in hindsight, I was very fortunate that I chose to enter financial services kind of right in the beginning of a lot of what's called the baby boomer generation retiring, right? And so, as much as I'd love to think, my success was due to hard work, and I definitely did work hard.
Right.
Lots of
there was
people
also
do.
a wave of people.
Yeah,
with
like I got
401ks
very
that needed
fortunate that there was this sort of secular trend, just like if you'd been in the Bay Area, during the days of Apple or, the HP campus. And so was fortunate that way, and that was enabled by living very modestly. But to connect back to the why, when my father passed away, the situation was my parents had recently separated. The divorce wasn't quite final, but the marriage was over. And I was in my teenage years, and my dad was really struggling with the drinking problem. So all that's kind of paint the color of the context. But when my dad passed away, there was a debt that was still owed on the house that we lived in at the time. And in that environment, your neighbors are basically like family.
Sure.
And they're just they become
closest to
absolutely.
you. Yeah.
And I grew up 45 miles away from a grocery store, so it's like, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? I mean, there's situations where there was a neighbor of ours whose wife needed to get to the hospital. We showed up with snow shovels and dug them out so that the ambulance could get there, right?
Right.
That's just what you do. So all that to say, I remember one of my neighbors sitting down on the couch with me, and I was grieving my dad, and I was like, as the man of the house now, which is the talk you get a lot as the older son, I started worrying about all the ways, like, my brother going to be okay, my mom going to be okay, what are we going to do? And I remember my neighbors being like, your dad was a really smart man. He's very thoughtful. My dad was very intelligent. And she was like, there's this insurance that you can buy that it pays off all your debts when you pass away. I'm sure he had it. And he didn't. And so it was a very financially devastating event for us. And I remember going through that process, deciding internally, I will never be in this situation. I don't have to care if I have to live on rice and beans. I will never. And so it really made an impression on me.
Even way back when you were
And if you ask my mom, why didn't they do some of these things that in my eyes seem pretty basic? It's because what she'll say is no one ever talked to them about it, or no one they trusted ever talked to them about it. And so with my dad being a teacher, or formerly a teacher, I try to, act with the heart of a teacher in that, and trying to have that conversation with people, really leading with, hopefully enabling them to have the same insights that we do, and enabling to take responsibility for strengthening their financial position. So that's in hindsight. I didn't understand why my dad passed away or how that might transform my life for the better, enable me to serve others, until, again, footsteps in the sand. You look back and you're like, oh, maybe that's why this happened. So in many ways, I think that God was uniquely shaping me to do this type of work for folks.
And talk to me about the purpose-driven wealth element. Was that, I assume that wasn't when you were a red card Thrivent rep or whatever, that was that already part of the notion, or where did that evolve as your practice continued?
Like the name and sort of the idea of it?
And kind of the why of it even a little bit. Like, so there's a lot of financial planners out there that are Bob Jones or whatever, and Bob Jones and Associates, if they add people to the team.
Yeah. So there's a couple of really transformative pieces of my life that have really informed almost everything that I do. The first premise that I've lived personally, having to grieve with all this, when I coped with my dad's passing, there were many mistakes that I made, and there was a dark enough period of time where, maybe not seriously, but I was contemplating, like, do I even deserve to be here anymore? And one of the thoughts and beliefs that helped enable me to get out of the shame and the victimhood that I felt by a very unjust experience, but, part of that I was doing myself with self-destructive behaviors, was, if you know your why, you can bear almost anyhow. So, if you know your why, you can bear almost anyhow. And that premise was really established by Viktor Frankl in a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah. The modern version of that is
Simon. I was trying to remember where I remember that from.
And the modern version of that is Simon Sinek.
I suppose.
Know your why, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really important piece of who I am.
Start with why, isn't it?
Yeah, and start with why. Yep, exactly.
Sorry, we don't want Simon Sinek coming after us.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Simon. All honor to your name kind of thing. That was really important. And so the idea of purpose has always been important to me. I would also say that knowledge is not enough. Meaning, I think if knowledge was enough, most people would have six-pack abs and be millionaires at this point, because the internet has essentially democratized most knowledge.
Totally.
So there's an element of this of like, well, what does wisdom look like? What does it look like applied in my life? How can I be encouraging in helping you get there? And so this word encouragement is also important, which I was actually sitting in a church service at Timberline Church back when Derry Northrup was pastor. He was a pastor for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a service where he had taught me about this person named Barnabas.
Okay.
And Barnabas in the Bible was known as, the sort of simple story there is that based on how he showed up, he was originally kind of known as like maybe someone that was skeptical or unoptimistic or just not fun to be around. And his actions so changed by him finding hope in Christ that he was literally renamed by people as Barnabas and became known as the encourager.
Oh.
So originally I wanted to have our practice name be the Barnabas Associates, because I just thought, wow, that is literally what we do for a living. And if you understand where the etymology of the word courage comes from, or being an encourager, the Latin root of the word courage comes from heart. And so to be an encourager literally means to help tap in and walk with someone in their heart, or to connect language like we use their heart math with their pencil math.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to use Barnabas. There was a foundation that had already chosen it, reached out, was like, hey, can we use that? And so purpose-driven wealth is kind of where we landed on. But that was the start.
Well, it's probably a good
purpose
thing
focus.
because most people would be like, what the heck is Barnabas? You
Yeah,
know, there's
yeah.
a lot better metaphor for people to understand, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. So we try to drive forward and discover people's purpose, and then be encouraging of that, through financial conversations, really providing clarifying and confidence in that experience of sort of getting to walk with them, connecting the heart math and the pencil math.
Yeah.
So
I certainly, one of the reasons I resonated with Thrivent was, I had my motto, which is still LoCo's motto, the ask of your needs and share of your abundance. And Thrivent's got some level of tagline, plan well and be smart so you can live generously.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and trying to inspire that, build financial security, because then when you do have financial security, you can be generous in your community with your time and your treasure and everything else.
Yeah, you get the vibe. I think there's a responsibility we have, even so the framework that we use, stewardship. There's kind of three elements of good stewardship. And stewardship first, it's grounded in biblical principles, but it's a universal concept, which is I have a moral obligation to steward what I've been blessed with, because ultimately I don't get to take it with me. And the Christian perspective is it's really not mine to begin with.
Sure.
And so if that's the case, how do you put that into practice? Well, part of the reason why we have a responsibility to save and invest for our future isn't just to pile a whole bunch of hammers or other, if money's a tool, right? A whole bunch of stockpile tools.
Right.
It's to provide for ourselves when we're no longer able, willing, or have the capacity to work. And we've got a moral obligation to do that, right? To try to do our best. At the same time, we all know someone that's got more than enough money that isn't happy.
Yeah.
Right? So a good steward also tries to balance contentment and provision as part of that conversation. Contentment, we believe, is the best way to do that is by giving, right? Sacrificial giving. And so that can be financial resource, but one of the toughest things as an owner of a business to give is your time and your talent, right?
Yeah.
So there's an element of that really kind of breaks the power that money has over us, or really any finite resource, and not place our identity in things that are finite versus infinite. Like in my view, that would be God, but also if you're, a non-Christian perspective would say in the values that I hope to embody in the world, right? So contentment is a part of that. And then the third piece is enjoyment. I think it's really important to celebrate what you've been blessed with. And for most people, that involves doing it with other people. If you combine all those things and you do it in a very either prayerful or meditative way, a very conscious way, it's just tremendous the cascading effects it can have in someone's life, because finances touch every aspect, right? It touches your marital relationship. It touches your relationship with your kids. If you're a business owner or you're a team member of an employer group, you're working with people every day. And so there's a sort of relational and spiritual transformation that I think really does enable us to make the world a better place through pouring into people by helping them be a better steward.
Yeah. I just had a bit of a random thought, but this is a squirrel chase podcast.
I love the random part. Yeah.
And it's a curiosity. I have no idea what your tax bracket is, but I suspect you make significantly more taxable income than I do, right?
Sure.
Have you been attending? You go to church, I assume.
Yeah.
have you been attending the same church this whole time, or do churches kind of try to recruit the high income people to their?
I've personally not experienced that.
Like my church doesn't care if I'm there or not. They know I'm a small
Yeah,
member.
no,
I'm teasing a little bit, but that's one of the awkward things about even having a church or planning a church or growing a church, right?
Yeah, I've very consistently, my wife and I have attended Timberline. There was a period of time when we went through the stage of young kids where just candidly going to church was less frequent. I'd love to,
cool.
on paper say I was there every Sunday, but the reality was it was very hit or miss. And even now we try to balance, like candidly, it's a practice. It's something we aspire to do. All that said, we still attend Timberline Church very regularly, but there was a period of time where we attended Mountain View because during that stage of life, which mutual friend of ours, Drew Yancey, goes there. There's a number of other folks there.
Well, I go to a cousin church, The Crossing.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And so there's a period of time where we did that. Loved the communal aspect. That was a piece that we were really attracted to. Smaller church, easy to kind of see people, but we just really loved the services at Timberline.
You there for the rock band?
No, I mean, I actually
No.
I think the music at Mountain View is fantastic. I love their Spotify list is incredible, and
I should
my
check it out.
favorite Black Friday or Good Friday service that I've ever been to is the one at Mountain View. There was this acoustic guitar player that really felt this somber and sullen vibe of what was going on. My favorite so far, but I think Timberline is the best blend for us currently. Pastor Derry just retired recently.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Pastor, and I think is doing a great job. It's just, it's time, right? Transitioning like that's a difficult thing to do. But candidly, one of the things that's very appealing to us about that, they have a 5 p.m. Saturday time. Enables our family to go.
Right.
We went there instead of Easter Sunday. So
Well, and honestly, not to go back to the original question of, like, in a bigger organization, you're one of 200 members that are high income earners. You're not kind of a big fish. And some
but
churches
even the small churches, like I've never felt like, there's someone that cuts a larger check. So
Right, I wonder what it was like.
Yeah, I mean,
perspective.
maybe that happens to folks. I've never felt that way, and I suppose it's possible, but I haven't personally experienced
digress.
it. No, it's okay. I mean, what I love about you, Kurt, is if you have a question, you're going to
I've
ask
talked
it.
about the business of churching a lot with my pastors and stuff, and the launches and things like that.
It's
if you can get a
tough.
few whales in your congregation right away, it makes everything else easier. Right?
Sure. Amen. Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to make sure we talk about is you've been through a lot of fairly complex business disposition transactions and the planning and tax avoidance that goes into that, and obviously you can't give any advice on the podcast. We heard that in the disclosures, but like what I guess contrast to me like the first time you had an opportunity to work with somebody in a situation like that, and now I don't know, you've probably been through some dozen or more fairly sizable endeavors, so you've probably learned a lot as well. And probably there's differences and similarities, and every case is different would be probably a good.
Yeah, I mean every case is
Anticipation.
different. There are also similarities. So the first time, I was very fortunate that everything went well, everything went smoothly.
Okay.
And I say that because that's not always how it goes. So, but a little bit about.
And what's your role in a situation like that, really?
Well, so
You're not a broker,
ideally, we're involved a couple years prior to the transaction, and even partnering with in the industry, it would be called, a value accelerator, where there's a business coach or someone inside it. So there's really 3 elements of a business owner's life. There's their personal life, their personal finances, and the business. And the reality is, if for most mid-sized business owners, it all kind of feels like the same thing, And there needs to be very intentional steps taken to make sure that, like, the business that's going to command the highest price in the market is also the best business to own.
Right.
So if I were to go up to a business owner and say, "Hey, you want to attend my exit planning workshop?" The answer would be like, "What's that? I'll deal with that later." But if I was like, "Hey, do you want to help understand, how to grow the value inside of your business and grow EBITDA and more?" And the reality is they're the same thing, because the best business to own is also the best business to sell, right? It's going to command the highest multiple. So ideally, we're involved many years ahead of time, partnering with multiple stakeholders as part of that process to help, we're blending the personal and the personal financial, but we're partnering with other professionals along the way,
Right.
technicians like CPAs,
Tax
attorneys,
perhaps.
bank lending relationships, in addition to anybody else, some members of their leadership team who often become clients as well as part of that. So that's really, we're kind of wrapping our whole arms around that. And I will say we don't just work with business owners. This is kind of an area that I've differentiated. We also work with people making the transition to financial independence, the retiree stage. But, I'm at a point where a lot more of my clients look like that because I've been so established, whereas
Right.
other members of our team are as gifted or more so as I am in doing that. So,
But they haven't been through nearly the number of
on the business
complex
owner
business
stuff,
yeah.
no. Yeah. And that's the one that's relevant for this podcast. And even kind of, I didn't realize how differentiated what we did here locally was versus, because there's not a lot of people that do it. So, all that to say, the first transaction we walked through was a very large one, and it was not the primary owner, but they had a very large stake in it. And
Okay.
it was north of $20 million pre-tax. And they were acquired by a private equity group. And it actually, 3 years, this person had been asking me sort of on the fence of engaging her help. And after he kind of knew we got involved, and there was really little we could do at that point to help, do some education on what tax efficiency could look like on that transaction. But on the planning side, everything came together. Like because we'd spent so much.
Could have been even more effective if they'd started a couple years
That's
sooner.
the ideal. That's the ideal. But what I mean by that is, like, there were no issues with like the buyer. There were no
Clean transaction.
It was very smooth once things were signed on the dotted line, and he actually had a lot of clarity with what he wanted already. A lot of times, though, when folks are working towards that, so much of our identity can be tied into being a business owner, right? And I'm not saying that's even a bad thing. It's just, if you don't have some element of a personal plan to start exploring other aspects or practicing what that looks like, you might have a very large bank deposit and not know, you're sitting downstairs in your box or at the pool table and be like, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
I don't know who I am anymore, because our most valuable asset, the most finite one, is actually our time and our talent. And I know that might seem kind of like guru-esque, but it's actually true, having walked people through this. So there's an element of this that when people start to go through it, they'll start, if we're doing good question asking and we've earned enough trust to be direct, we're sort of thoughtfully holding up a mirror and saying, well, you're saying this, but you're doing this. Help us understand. What do you want? Do you want, there's dissonance there, right? And ideally, we're doing that, 2 to 3 years before an anticipated transaction, because, one of the things we first do for folks that engage our firm is we calculate what's called their wealth gap. So the simple understanding of that is, hey, this is what your liquid assets look like, right? So let's take IRAs, 401ks, which is oftentimes not very much for the owners because they put so much back into the business.
Yeah, they got $600,000 in retirement accounts and a $20 million business.
Yeah, which I know that's exactly, like, it's the proportions, right? People might hear 600,000, not a lot, and be like, oh, but the reality is, people know
600,000 isn't retirement money.
It's not for them, especially if they're used to having some perks for the business where, they go and do their continuing education, but they'll simultaneously extend a day, and it's all legitimately a tax write-off, right? Well, you don't get to do that anymore, but yet if you want to do that, you got to build that into your budget. The business ain't going to cut the check when you're gone anymore, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of go through a process to say, hey, what is your needed income? And what is your needed income? What are the sources going to be after the transaction? A lot of times there's commercial real estate involved, so we try to understand. And oftentimes it's beneficial to the existing owner to sign some sort of lease as part of that transaction, so at least for a period of time they can. So we combine all that, figure out how much income they need, what their total wealth needs to look like to get there. And then we sort of reconcile that to say, hey, here's what the value of the business is. Here's the sum of all your other assets. Here's the gap. How are you going to close that gap to get to your intended goal? And, there's a couple different ways they get there. One is to save more. And at the same time, they can also grow the value of their business.
Right.
So now suddenly that becomes a very actionable thing, because if we're partnering with the business coach, a good one, we happen to know several. Drew's a common, we work with him a lot. These folks that are actually very involved in helping bring that to life, the simple math would be this. If you have a business that, has $1 million of EBITDA, And let's just say the multiple in that industry, that's how you estimate the value of that business.
3x, 4x, whatever.
Yeah, let's just say it's 5 for easy math,
Yep.
right? Okay, so $1 million business in this sector gets a 5 multiple when they sell pre-tax, right? That's $5 million.
Yep.
Well, if they take steps in their business over a 3 to 5 year period to double the EBITDA, right?
Yep.
Not
Yep.
only is that going to help the business owner have a better bottom line in terms of net profit most of the time,
Yep.
right? But they've also, just with this math, 2 million times 5 is 10.
Yep.
So that's doubling their
usually
total
it's 6
value.
or
Exactly.
7
So there's a
if you
double
get it bigger.
compounding, right?
Yep.
So now I'm looking at 2 million of EBITDA times 5. Oh no, not just 5, because there's now a better buyer's marketplace for that, and it's viewed as less risky because you have better structural capital, customer capital,
more
etc.
intact team when you leave.
All that stuff. So now you've got 2 million of EBITDA times maybe a 7 multiple. Well, that's 14 million versus 5. That's almost a 3x in this example.
Right.
Where else are you going to get that in the market in the same? Let's just say that there was someone willing to buy like Tesla call options or something, just crazy speculative, right? Oftentimes the business owner is going to see that and be like, yeah, but I can manage the risk more, have this industry perspective, all those other kind of things.
Right.
This feels safer to me, whether perceived as real.
We've got a 6% market share. All we got to do is get to a 9% market share.
And they start to understand how to do that. And so, because for them, that's what they do all day long, and it's very empowering. And what's the right balance of that? Because something can inevitably go wrong. So how do we gradually also say, yeah, we're going to make sure that like you're going to do everything you can, and we're all humble enough to know that we do our best, and we've all had rough years.
Is your life insurance paid up?
If you've been an owner for a long enough period of time, or you've talked to people that have been through it, there's inevitably the unexpected, right? For better, for worse. So even if you like on the for better side, it's like, well, are you ready to? Are your books cleaned up enough? If there was a thought to play to say yes or no to an offer, like let's just say you got an offer today, would you be prepared enough to know how to contextualize whether you should say yes or no?
Yeah,
right. Most owners don't have an answer to that. Same thing. If something unexpected happens, they miss the number. What's their backup plan? And so it's dialing in the right. Okay, well, we take some chips off the table, but reinvest back in the business, and this is the right proportions of us to get it to our intended stated goal over X period of time. And we do that in an ongoing way because, COVID was a very different business environment than 2025.
Totally.
Right. Different than, hey, the Strait of Hormuz is or isn't shut down.
right.
Or Hormuz, or
tariffs are on, or tariffs are off.
I mean, exactly, right? Like if you're still a manufacturer, okay, what impact does it have? It's a different year in 2025 than it was in 23. So.
Yeah, 100%. And so do you charge quite a bit for all this planning that's associated? And then, because in the end game, then you, on the financial investments, you manage that. I'm part of, and I want to talk about kind of what are the income products available these days. I know one thing that I've observed in my career in banking and after is that when people have
excuse me,
built up a lot of assets over time, and they've lived on this income from the business many times with perks and stuff like that, and they've got these assets, but I don't want to sell my stocks to live on. And I don't want to try to decide which ones to sell every month and stuff like that. And so what are the, there's certainly commercial real estate if they keep that and stuff, but what are kind of some of the income financial assets that are common, and is there yield out there in that space these days? Yeah,
you've asked several questions.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I want to try to respond to them accordingly. So, one of the things that's unique about our practice for a lot of the industry is people can just pay us a fee for advice. And so that fee is based on the scope of work. I would say, for most of the owners that we work with, scope of work, the fee starts around $10,000. It kind of varies based on the scope of work, etc.
And the duration, I assume.
I mean, yes, but I would just say that's a good starting point, and we kind of go through, all the aspects of that.
Kind of digest the situation, give kind of a rough plan based on what we know now.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's just a one-time engagement. For many, though, that are going through the successive planning, they might have a 401k that's through Gusto or ADP through their payroll, and there's just not a lot of assets to manage, but they still want advice, valuable advice. And so they're willing to and want to pay us the fee for that scope of work to sort of walk through side by side. And I would say the vast majority of our clients start that way, including folks that are within 5 years in retirement or pre-retirement, because it's very hard to make the decision to say, hey, I'm going to turn over everything to you,
Right.
Before trust is established or even really understanding that. So I'd say
So you start a lot of relationships with the
vast
part.
majority, Yeah, I would say almost exclusively. Like this year, I don't think there's been one client that's onboarded with us that didn't start first with that.
With a paid plan.
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah, because I just think
It's a really different model than there kind of was in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and it's
ours. Your firm too. You're more comprehensive with everybody.
I would say it's
whatever.
been trending that way. I would say even 5 years ago, at least 60% of folks kind of started that way. Honestly.
Cool.
So all that to say, there's 3 ways they can work with us. They can pay a fee for advice. If there's a product that they need, we can broker it for them, and usually that's compensated in the form of commission, or we can do investment management for them as a percentage of investments under management.
Our REI model.
Or RAA, yeah, exactly. So those are kind of the 3 ways that it unfolds. Yeah, and so then to your second question, which is, okay, they have realized this event, they've done planning. And
I got a bunch of money, but I don't have a bunch of
income.
income.
What do I do with it, right? Yeah. And so there is an element of income planning. I think there's a couple ways to think about that framework. The first is, do I want to transfer the risk to creating the income, or do I want to keep it on my side of the ledger? And what do I mean by transferring the risk? So Social Security is not a product that anybody can sell you, but it is and I'm using this as a simple example because most people have like Social Security or PARA in Colorado.
Yeah.
When you elect to turn on Social Security, can have a significant benefit in terms of the total dollar amount that you receive over your lifetime.
Yeah, start at 62, it's this. Start at 70.
Right. So how do I make that decision knowing that it could make $100,000 of difference in received distributions over the course of my lifetime? Well, I should probably make the right choice for me, right? When I'm looking to maximize my Social Security benefit, I'm transferring more and more risk to the federal government to make that obligation right. Meaning, it's the federal government's job. They are ensuring that and saying, I will backstop this. Now, in theory, could the federal government go under? Yes. Is that likely? Probably not.
A lot of it depends on will happen first.
Yeah, most likely, right? And so the reason why that's important to
your
understand...
other investments will have suffered too.
The reason why... most likely, right? There's no guarantee here. I got to be careful with the language, but yes, directionally, that's probably a wise... You're not wrong to assume that. So the first concept to sort of think through is like, do I want to transfer? Who do I want to be responsible for creating the income, right? Because if I transfer the risk to an outside entity, there are insurance products that enable that. Yeah. Annuities basically combine a risk transfer or insurance element and an income component to that. And there's a whole host of annuities beyond the scope of what's probably appropriate today, but you're basically combining insurance or transferring risk plus an investment component from aggressive to conservative, right? Yeah. So then the other question of that is, okay, so let's just say you don't want to transfer the risk and you want it to be on your side. Well, retaining commercial real estate is a way of keeping the risk on your side of the table, right? If it goes under, there's no one backstopping that. Yep. You can manage it more, et cetera, right? And there's a certain amount of concentration risk, meaning it's your eggs are all in one basket on that side.
40% of your wealth there.
There's policy risk, if Larimer County has a different tax.
I've got a great property in the tech center that you need to partner with me on.
Right. Okay.
Right now, it's a little bit sketchy, but I'm sure if we just get a couple more tenants in there, it'll break even.
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So, I mean, you think through all of these things, right? And like, I think a challenge with real estate a lot of times is you really don't get liquidity unless you like borrow against it, because it's kind of hard to just sell like a bathroom or like, for $10,000. So I think it's looking at all of those elements to say what's the right mix for you and what you're comfortable taking. Now, I will just say in experience, a lot of owners feel very, very comfortable because of taking risk in their commercial real estate, at least for a period of time if they sell, because they're already kind of taking risk that the buyer is going to pay them. So let's just say they get acquired by a private equity company. A lot of times they're going to have signed disclosures and stuff like that to say if you misrepresented things. Yep. And there might even be an earn-out element where it's like you have to hit performance. So in their mind, rightfully or wrongfully,
have to work here for a year or two even.
Couple years, they're going to look at that and be like, I'm already kind of comfortable taking an equity level of risk. What's the worst case of taking credit risk too? And that's kind of how they look at it, oversimplification of the commercial real estate. But they could have residential real estate. And then even beyond that,
because if you got residential real estate and you bought them near, either without mortgages or very small mortgages, then you've got a pretty low risk investment with a pretty moderate yield. The cash on cash return isn't terrible.
It depends. Yeah, it depends.
It's terrible if it's Old Town Fort Collins and
Well,
you just want to rent it.
Well, that's what's interesting, right? Because even that's market contingent, and I think a lot of people make those assumptions. And so let's just say your cash on cash return, let's just say your cash on cash for your real estate was 3%, and you're assuming that residential real estate averages at the inflation rate. You can say whether those assumptions are right or wrong, but let's just say it's around 6%. Well, and right now you can reinvest that cash on cash return inside of a cash yield savings account at an actual higher rate.
Right.
So at least as of today's stating, right? Like most money markets are paying 3% or up.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, that's really not efficient from a cash flow perspective. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. We talk numbers all day long, but the point is, are the decisions that you're making intentional and they do align with your expectations, and have you thought through these things?
Yeah.
So we'll take people step by step through creating this, basically to kind of come together in a way that works for them, understanding all the trade-offs. And obviously if they're like, hey, what would you do if you were me? We'll say, well, here's what I would do, but it's oftentimes saying, here's what I'd do in your situation because here's what I've understood is important to you. And so much of that is not just making sure that we listen to them, but they feel listened to.
Right.
Because honestly, like, do most business owners really want to focus on this? If we're being honest, no. Like, they've already got enough things going on, a lot of people trying to call in and sell to them XYZ thing. So just the ability to simplify to say, hey, once we've sort of mapped this out, you can just say no to everything else. You have a very simple framework because most of the time, if they're a growing business owner, their primary wealth creation vehicle where they're going to get the most potential for upside is their business.
For sure.
So, okay, all these other kind of fancy things that you thought you had to do, they're frankly not necessary. You can do them if you want, but stay focused there because your talent happens to have a really good ROI there right now. At least, for most businesses they're going.
Yeah.
So it can be tremendously freeing and clarifying even just in how they spend their time beyond how all the, Excel sheets and financial planning software works out with the pencil math. And then that can be incredibly freeing on the heart math side because, sometimes people actually start to dream a little bit more once they feel assured. They're like, oh, what do I want to do now? Oh, actually, I do want to do consulting. Oh, they just, it starts to free them up to do that a little bit more.
I want to be a facilitator for LoCo Think Tank.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mr. Pete Gasley.
This episode is sponsored by LoCo Think Tank. LoCo Think Tank provides peer collaboration for business owners. We build smart, safe places to help business leaders navigate every stage of the business journey, and we love what we do and who we do it with. Our model features give-back-minded business veterans in the role of LoCo facilitators, and we're always looking for abundance-minded individuals to add to our membership, facilitator team, LoCo community, or to feature on this podcast. Listeners of this podcast who go on to become members of LoCo Think Tank get their 6th month of membership for free. Just mention the LoCo Experience podcast on your application. To learn more, visit our website at locothinktank.com. That's LoCo thinktank.com.
This soon to be in your right hand is from our spirit sponsor, and this is perhaps a drink you haven't had before. It's called WizCal.
Last time I was here, it was like the Century thing or something. Where
the Infinity bottle.
Infinity bottle.
And there is still that opportunity.
I've already ridden the Infinity experience,
so
I'm sure this will delight as well.
This is kind of a hybrid of whiskey and mezcal. Mm-hmm. So it's got a smoky, so it's part agave nectar and then part kind of traditional bourbon made by Seed and Spirit Distilling and kind of their flagship and one of their differentiators. And I'm just curious what you're going to think. And that's straight on ice.
Yeah, that's delicious.
Really good.
I like it. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's got that nice smoky finish that makes you smile, or at least for me.
Yeah, there's also okay, that's like rolling at the end for me. That's nice. Yeah, it's very good. I don't know all the language to convey what I'm experiencing, but I would drink more of it, and I intend to.
Well,
yeah.
If we were a real highfalutin podcast outfit, we'd send you home with a bottle of WizCal, but I don't have the budget for that. But I do have the budget for a bottle of crazy ginger hot sauce of your own, some LoCo Experience shades, as well as some...
Now, is this like a Hot Ones hot sauce where it's like, oh boy.
Kinda.
Oh, really? Okay.
A little bit.
All right, fair enough.
I'll give it an 8. You don't have to open yours. I've got an open one here. Well, and here's your card. You can, suitable for framing after the LoCo Experience gets...
Habanero, sweet. Okay, so habanero's in it. That's good.
Peach is the number 1 ingredient.
Peaches, bell pepper, habanero, carrot vinegar, ginger garlic, ghost pepper flakes. Oh, okay. All right. So if I don't survive this podcast,
you'll survive.
You know where to find me.
I didn't bring any napkins, but
Okay, no worries.
We'll be fine.
All right, so
We'll have your tasting notes on the hot sauce now too.
all right, I'll have it noted that
Juicy
I'm.
one. Yeah, you did.
I got a big one.
You took a fairly bold one. Yeah, good job.
Smells really good. I'm scared. Should I be?
No, it's very friendly. It's just got some heat. The heat builds a little bit over time,
Okay.
but I think it's nice.
So far, so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes
have more.
there's heat where it like
Yeah, it hits you right.
I
in
don't
the
like
face.
I don't like heat that's like in the back of your throat and chokes you.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
Da Bomb hot sauce.
Yeah.
If you've ever tried that, it's like
I'm trying to be nice.
why
to
would
people.
you eat that?
I'm trying to be nice to
This
people.
this is delicious.
Yeah.
Kudos. Thank you, Matador.
Yeah, so this is LoCo's Crazy Ginger Hot Sauce, available at Matador Mexican Grill. By the time this podcast is out, this is in the gray area. He's got it up for like testing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The label's been approved and stuff, but he can't really deliver me a full batch yet. So there's some
Matador,
samples.
my personal opinion, they make the best breakfast burritos in towns. Love it. And they have a maple jalapeno sauce. It's a combination of maple syrup with jalapeno for the light heat people out there. They actually have a ghost pepper with honey, which is also good. But like that sweet heat on a breakfast burrito, really nice. So big fan of Matador. Great
Does your
people
traffic
there.
pattern take you past there a lot, or
So I can, sometimes with my girls over the weekend, I'll take them to the Matador, and there's like, they're just very nice, but they have those little surprise things where you put a quarter in and get a treat, like little toys. So that's kind of a thing. Sometimes before, like I'll take I used to drop our kids off at the Harmony School, which is
yeah.
kind of right in that area.
that's when you fell in love with Matador?
Yeah, well,
originally?
actually, I had never had a breakfast burrito of theirs, and at our next level chapter meeting, Drew had brought some, and I was like, "Where are these from? These are so good."
Right.
So really
Okay.
good. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I think he goes another place now, but it's all good.
All good.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we were talking about a little bit at break is sometimes even when somebody's working towards selling a business, or even if they're just retiring from a long time career and they're trying to figure out what that income profile looks like, and you're getting in deep with people, and the husband and the wife start fighting in front of you about what each of them wants, and like, does it feel like a counselor job sometimes?
Sometimes.
And how do you navigate those kind of conversations?
Yeah. So I think all these areas of self-actualization, marital dynamics, your health, your finances, they all can catalyze one another. So like, for example, if someone gets a terminal health diagnosis, it can bring everything to the table that needs to be said, right or wrong, right? It's a catalyst to accelerate things.
Yeah.
And if anyone's ever been through a personal health event, it can be like a crisis where it provokes a sense of urgency. Money can act like a catalyst that way too, and both for the better and for the worse. Meaning that if someone's business starts to fail in a major way and they go through hardship, that can catalyze things. It can also catalyze it in a sense of abundance, because now suddenly I don't have this distraction to deal with these issues that have needed to been addressed for a long, long time, right? And so one of the things that's challenging about my line of work, I'm not a licensed therapist, but I believe what we do is a helping profession. And so it can be, there's an element of this that just, my bias is always that you'd rather be relationally and spiritually wealthy, and that financial wealth is a catalyst to those things. The scriptural support for that would suggest, both wisdom and inheritance are a good thing and benefits those that see the sun. But if you have to err on one side, err on wisdom. The principle of that is, like we've heard this phrase, would you rather give someone a fish or teach them how to fish?
Sure.
Right? So I think I'm always a fan of trying to help people make the most loving decisions whenever they're in challenges like that. It's very challenging to navigate those. And so it's not necessarily us telling them what to do, but oftentimes being a good listener and saying, hey, here's what I'm hearing, and asking them questions that sort of help them understand how to maintain their own dignity and, in their own eyes, what maintaining upward aim looks like for them in these challenging moments.
Use that language most
Maintaining
of the time,
upward aim.
that upward
Yeah.
aim kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's relational or business growth or relationship orientation, things like that.
Yeah, it's the last year or two, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on some personal things that I've gone through, but also why the story of Christ, even for non-believers, is so compelling. And I think one of the most attractive qualities about Jesus, even if you don't believe in him, let's just say it's a story, is you essentially have someone that went through just a tremendous suffering, a tremendously trying circumstance. And he chose consciously to maintain upward aim voluntarily, and he did so without resentment.
Yeah.
So if you think about how Jesus responded to Judas, he cried first for Judas.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Judas betrayed himself.
Sure.
I think we'd all like to understand that when we go through a crisis in our life and hope that we can do that. I think Jesus as a story gives us that potential. It also, I think, to get down a bunny trail here, if AI is in a world where it makes objective truth, let's just say that you thought that AI was going to make objective truth more possible, which I'm not even saying that's your conclusion, but
Yep.
if there's the ability to reconcile facts more, there's an element of our human experience, forgiveness and grace, that depending on your worldview can seem really irrational and unproductive. And yet, if you believe that you have, I believe that we all have fallibilities. And so what happens when our fallibility causes suffering to another person that they ultimately didn't deserve? It's the act of finding forgiveness and sort of going through that and extending grace. It's, if you're in a situation like that, it doesn't always feel like it's the right thing to do 100%. If it's a really trying circumstance, maybe for some people, but I've definitely had situations in my life where I'm like, is that the right thing? What is the most loving thing? And so inevitably, part of why now in my career, in my business, one of the things that I feel most privileged is a lot of times we get to hear people open up these really vulnerable parts of their life and not necessarily tell them what to do, but to help be there in it with them. And the role that empathy plays in that, and sort of just saying, trying to encourage them to maintain their own dignity and enable that for other people that they care about in very tricky situations. Take a business owner let's take another scenario. A business owner has a key person that commits fraud.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might think, oh, okay, the smart thing to do is to send that person to jail. But what happens if they've been in for 12 years and all this other relations stuff? What is the right thing there?
Right.
And I'm using that example because there's an element of betrayal with that.
Right.
So it's relevant. So there are all these kind of things, and I think what's wild about right now is I think people are going to start paying attention to this more internally. Beyond just the objective truth, again, if AI helps us do that, what am I actually searching for?
I know.
I think COVID
AI
started
told
that.
me that a Trek Verve 2 bicycle was an e-bike, and we've been looking online on Facebook Marketplace for a secondhand e-bike for my wife. And so I had it all lined up, had a great deal, and then my wife starts looking at it. She's like, where's the battery pack? And I was like, oh, well, Google's AI summary told me it was an e-bike. Mm-hmm. It lied.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And so here's the interesting...
Not intentionally, I'm sure. I'm sure it's very ethical.
Let's not
AI.
attribute intent, right? We don't know. But here's what most people have seen this ad where it's like, I'll kind of create a visual. So imagine a very scrawny 5'1" dude that says, and he's here, and he's the LLM, call it ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, is personified as a gym trainer. And this 5'1" guy says, hey, I really want to become an NBA basketball player.
Right.
And this 5'1", I'm really exaggerating this, but it's like, oh, and this coach responds, oh, absolutely, you can totally do that.
Right. They're so encouraging.
Yeah,
to the
it's so
point of
encouraging,
being
and it's
ridiculous.
this endless
You're blowing
validation.
smoke up my skirt again, Claude.
Endless validation, right?
Yes.
And so, and then the other joke on this was, okay, and then it pauses, for $19.95, get your 12-step plan to self-actualize, right? And so there's an element of this that's going to start feeling really strange to people and kind of icky, like how we've all had an experience where, is my phone listening to me in terms of how that ad was shown up?
Sure.
So this is going to get exaggerated, but I say this because there's also spiritual stories or just, fables that have described, most of the time the antagonist in the story, Satan in the Christian worldview is someone that just endlessly validates you and tells you what you want to hear.
Right, the deceiver.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, like part of why I'm so privileged to walk with people in these moments is when they're opening up their vulnerabilities and like we have the space to sort of develop trust, then it's having the conversation, which is, hey, there's how you're telling me you see yourself, and then there's your behaviors. I'm not here to say which one is right. What do you want to choose?
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why people trust us is because I'm willing to lean into that discomfort after trust is established, and I feel like I have a keen understanding.
Yep. Well, and that's part of, I didn't really think about that part of your practice, but that's part of the experience in a LoCo Think Tank chapter as well, is
100%.
like telling people stuff that they might not want to hear, but that is nevertheless true. And holding to it, holding them accountable to reacting to it.
I had a conversation with a client the other day. I'm trying to think. So they run a business and they're thinking about succession planning, and they've been complaining about it. And I say complaining because complaining for me is defined as continuing to highlight the same pains with an unwillingness to do anything different, right? And at the same time expecting it to be different,
Right.
Which some people define that as insanity, right? And so I finally said, hey, I've noticed you've mentioned this over the last year and a half. What have you done since we last talked to try to resolve this? Because here's some things we've talked about. Like, not. And I'm like, okay. And I said this in loving way. I was like, okay, so what it sounds like is there's what you're telling me you want versus what you did. Is this still a priority for you, or are you going to give up on it? And it kind of forced the question, and like it was a little uncomfortable.
No, I can't give up on it because succession.
Well, I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable question because I'm just trying to clarify what is it here that you want. Because if you're telling me ultimately it's not a priority, okay, then my job is going to be listen, and be like, okay, I get it. We all have stuff that we, I think there's a YouTube channel skit out there where it's like there's a romantic partnership and one of the partners has like a nail in their head. It's a she, and she's like, no, it just feels like...
You can't just fix it.
And the husband in this instant is like, no, just take the nail out of your head. And she's like, no, you're not listening to... So it's kind of one of those things like, well, what do you want right now?
Right.
Do you want me to just listen? Because I can, but if you wanted, what is your priority? And I think once you've got enough relationship with people, you can lean into that. Someone say, hey, I'm noticing a dissonance here. Or maybe I misunderstood. So if you do it with humility, they're like, oh, no, actually... And there have been times where I've been wrong.
Right. I do need to do
actually, I actually misunderstood. Thanks for clarifying that, But I would say usually there's probably an 80% chance that there's a dissonance there. And I think that's what's really helpful about the relational aspect of the work that we do.
Yeah. I assume we can talk about this. A couple of years ago, you were talking about like maybe buying a franchise, starting another business.
Yeah.
Is that kind of doing something other than the financial planning space still compelling to you?
What I've learned about myself is I'm kind of like an endless... I love personal growth and personal development. And the second that I start to feel constrained, I will start exploring other things to sort of figure out what's going on with the dissonance within me. So I think at the time that was really an expression, my wife, she was really trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. And so I was like, hey, we're trying to choose to do this because she was trying to like reinvent herself and sort of cope with
and the kids had kind of gone off.
Yeah. And she tried the stay-at-home parent thing for a bit, and it just wasn't her truth at that time. And so, that was something we were exploring. But I will say, to kind of continue on that vein, one of the things that I am experimenting with right now inside is I think that all these areas of work are going to start to converge. So I think we've talked about this before, but I think people's desire to sort of lean into these areas of self-actualization, I see all the overlap that exists there. And I think at least for a period of time, an LLM is not going to be... There's going to be a period of time to where people sort of naturally seek out the dissonance. What we've seen with like Facebook and Instagram, these other things is they'll just kind of choose like the dopamine cycle, and like it'll probably be gamified to get you addicted to it, and we'll have to cope with that. And then there will be suffering that comes from that, and then people will respond to that suffering. COVID really kind of teased some of that stuff out, right? In terms of what people coped with, and some people responded while others didn't. So I see all these areas of like marital relationships, friendships, relationships, spiritual dilemmas. What is the meaning of life? Who am I? How does this show up in everyday stuff? Especially because if AI does truly replace, let's just say it does cut an 8-hour workday down to 4 hours. 4 hours is a lot of time. And if if the stat is true, I heard this, I don't know if it's true, but let's just say it's directionally correct, where, the average adult spends 11 hours a day scrolling their phone. Okay. Let's just say it's half that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did hear that stat. I don't know the source. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just 11 hours a day. Now, this could be passively during a Zoom meeting that you're not really paying attention to. It could be maybe your customer service representative. Maybe from 7 p.m. to 10, you're sitting in your bed, right? All that time added up throughout the day. Oh, I'm in traffic.
I mean, I hit the 5 hours a day kind of range usually, sometimes just under, sometimes a little over, but it's a lot of podcasts.
So let's just take five. Okay,
I just got something in my ear hole for a couple of hours
Let's take
a day.
5. Let's take 5 hours, okay? Now you have another 4 hours.
Right.
Is the answer really
Sweet.
that you need more?
I need 9 hours of scrolling, Clint.
Right. But that's the temptation, right?
Yeah.
Because like during COVID, what sure, did some people use that to like reinvent themselves,
go hiking,
healthy
get
habits,
skinny,
etc.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like most people didn't choose the more dignified route. They fell into the habit of their fallibilities until they suffered enough, where the pain of that was enough to sort of cause
And then
them
they
to
turned it
question.
around, and now, shit, like 2 out of 3 people don't drink alcohol anymore. They come on the podcast, they're like, "No, I quit drinking after COVID."
And many people,
Which bars and alcohol stores are suffering, and now there's like not alcohol,
of course,
hangout bars and stuff like that.
and there's generational things with that too. But
sure,
all that to say that I think that is going to continue, because I don't know that people know how to bear the weight of existential crises, and like there's a lot of beauty and gift that comes with that, and people. I'll say this: I've had to go through moments of my life where I had to learn how to suffer well, and that first starts with being so crushed by it that you have to do something different.
Yeah, have to move on.
And what's wild about that is most people don't just want to feel unconditionally loved; they want to know what they're willing to suffer for. And the only thing to truly know that about yourself is to actually encounter an experience like that.
Interesting.
And yet most people don't challenge themselves enough or actually know what they're willing to suffer for, because they're more interested in being comfortable.
Right. Which, if all you pursue is comfort, you'll probably suffer lightly all of your life, kind of.
Depends on your worldview.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
if depends on
maybe
what
it
you want
feels
to
really, really
accomplish.
good for a period of time to be endlessly validated, but inevitably, I tend to believe that most people have this deeper yearning of, well, but is that really how I am?
I'm thinking about these LLM coaches being like, "I know you didn't get your workout in today, but tomorrow you'll get it, Tiger."
Sure.
Anyway.
Well, there's an element of that, right? And so I don't know what the right answer is. I do see a lot of those areas of work converging. And if my life's calling is to sort of help people self-actualize, I think that's something I get a lot of deep meaning from, and I hope I am relevant enough to journey with them to do that. Finance is one lens to do that, helping people make more confident and clear decisions in their money, but there's overlap in all these other areas.
Do you think people would actually, I guess, like work shorter work days? Like if AI actually does decrease the need for human involvement in work, would it be such that like everybody gets 4-hour days instead of 8-hour days now, or would it be that half of the people are laid off and the other half of people have jobs?
I think what I've learned
Or
is
some
that
combination.
I don't think anyone really knows.
Yeah.
I think I don't know that I would have had the wisdom to say, hey, if we ever go through a pandemic where we have these situations, this is how people are going to respond.
Yeah.
What I feel confident saying is that there will be suffering. I think people will be pleasantly and unpleasantly surprised. And people will when we fall short of our own expectations, when we're willing to look like that, the gift is the compost that can come from that reflection if we choose to do things differently. And how people respond to that will be more important than what actually occurs.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier, I think you used the term like denigrate or something like
Dignity.
Dignity, but there was also something about doing hard things. Like, I forget quite what the context was, but I wanted to reflect back to the faith element of conversation just a bit. Mm-hmm. And I've been listening to an Eastern Orthodox pastor from St. Spiridon for several years now. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, he's the father of my good friend's son's girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
So I just saw his daughter the other night and was asking her more things about Greek Orthodox stuff and whatever. Mm-hmm. But Greek Orthodox churches all across the country are blowing up. Mm-hmm. Because it seems harder.
It's black and white. So I think,
I think it calls for a higher level of, here's our calendar versus the other one. We got all these things. And
in the business world, the advice here is like if you can niche down and say who you're for, by default, it makes it easier for those people to find. What I see going on, and these things are historical pattern. Here's how I'd respond to that. What provoked in me. One of the benefits of fundamentalism is you know what absolute truth is. The downside of that is nepotism and sort of incestuous thought. That's the shadow side of that. There's folks that would interpret things with a historical context or relativism. The problem is that the shadow side of that is more relativism. And the issue is both sides see each other as the enemy when the reality is they're paradoxes that can only be embraced with grace, forgiveness, and a framework to accommodate differences and wisdom to discern that I am more than my idea or philosophy. My values are more important. How do we practice that most? That is a art and a human experience, but that is the tension that I see there. Right now, I think people are trying to, there's a draw towards fundamentalism because they want to understand what is true.
Yeah.
That's what I see that is. There's also a draw to more relativism as well because they're like, well, there is no truth. Okay.
Well, it reminds me of that old metaphor of the king that wanted to know what the economy was going to do. And he's like, I'm sick of all these economists being like, on the one hand this and on the other hand that. Like, find me somebody that can tell me exactly what's going to happen. And they searched the kingdom and they found two.
Yeah.
But they were diametrically opposed to each other.
Yeah.
They just couldn't survive together. And whereas everybody else was a more rational approach, I suppose. We wanted to do some purpose-driven questions since you are
Why not?
Purpose-Driven Wealth. And thank you to Purpose-Driven Wealth of Thrivent for sponsoring our Purpose-Driven Questions segment. At Purpose-Driven Wealth, they believe financial clarity leads to a life of contentment and purpose. Their mission is to help guide clients using a values-driven, stewardship-based approach focused on provision, contentment, and enjoyment. With more than a century of experience, Thrivent helps individuals and families navigate life and business transitions and prepare for the future while creating space to live generously and give back in meaningful ways. To learn more about Purpose-Driven Wealth, please call 970-330-7411 for a complimentary initial consultation. And now, on to the questions. I like this one. When someone gives your eulogy one day, do you have an idea of who you'd want it to be and what you'd hope they'd say? Your children are fairly young yet, so even choose it. You have two?
Yeah, I have two.
Is one of them the better speaker for such a circumstance? Sorry, they're pretty young for.
No, that's okay. And is part of the question like if I had passed away this week or today, or
maybe,
is it
maybe our 20 years from now? That's more fun to imagine, really, or 40 years from now, call it. So you're at least pretty old.
The answer is probably different in the future, but where I felt called to answer that was if I passed away right now. So what I tend to see that is like through the eyes of my daughters and then the eyes of my wife.
Yeah. It's not me, is it? No. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. One of the better. I've been to a fair number of funerals.
If they give me the chance to talk, I will, though.
No,
I don't want the main gig, but I'll be a side piece.
I've actually been to a fair number of funerals in part because we'll oftentimes go to funerals of our clients. We get that close. Like a lot of them feel like extended family. Some of the funerals that felt the way that I would like them to are not just one person giving the eulogy, but several people that can tell the arcs of the life. And really, if it's clear who the person was, not just who they were, but why they chose to be that way. So I would probably pick some. If I had to name some people, in the first arc of my life, I would probably choose one of my closer friends that I've still connected to, but to speak to that part of my life, say from like kindergarten to call it college years, which his name's Aaron. But we're still friends. I literally have known him since kindergarten, grew up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I would love to hear him speak to that and just who I was at that time. The next couple, I have some friends from graduate school. There's one in particular named Jesse. We're still friends to this day, even though he doesn't live here, that would speak to that growth. I actually think if my wife could bear it, the period of time from when we got married to like the early stage of kids, like, kind of young parenthood, like when our oldest was like 2 to 3.
There in lockstep with you
Yeah,
during
there's just a
those
lot
times
of,
especially.
there's a lot of, we'll just call it catalyst to that part of our life that I think our daughters would really benefit from hearing and would honor her contribution and loss as part of that. And then honestly, I've developed a really good friendship with Drew, and he's got a theological background.
Yeah, he'd be strong at it.
And he's seen he's known about some of the personal stuff that's gone on and seen the business stuff that feels like, and I would say from a theological perspective, one of the things that's complimentary about him, he's so much smarter academically than I am. I mean, he's very smart.
Highly studied.
Highly studied, right? And so there would be an element of that with, I think that this would provoke enough of an emotional response. It'd be really beautiful to hear him speak because it would probably be a neat tension there.
Yeah.
And I think that would serve the broader audience because I know he would prepare well for it.
Yeah, right.
So, I'd say like the last kind of 2 to 5-ish years, and that's a kudos to you, by the way, because like I really got to know Drew a lot deeper through next level facilitation, like his role there.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure.
Like to know that you played a part in someone that I'd want to like speak to an arc of my life is kudos to you, my friend.
I wanted to give you a kudos for having a super thoughtful, like 4-person entree and reasons why. That was really you get a B+ at least for that. We've been judging people's answers to purpose-driven questions. That's okay, right? Like,
yeah, totally, sure. You can grade them how you want. It's your show.
I'm going to do another one.
Okay.
Can you describe a business decision you've made over time historically that didn't make sense on paper, but what was the outcome?
When a couple years ago, still a close friend of mine, former business partner, Jeff, and I decided to part ways.
Okay.
It was a financial step backwards in the short term because what I decided to err on was I erred on the side. It was a financial step backward. I'll kind of simplify that. And
you were generous with him on the terms of the.
Yeah, well, just because I kind of let him pick and choose things, and I really kind of prioritized like what would enable the transition to go smoothly. Why I did that was, and it wasn't like it was like a major thing, but I could have been a lot more scrupulous, and I chose not to. I think the benefits of that were positive in the sense that it really, because I was, for lack of better terms, sort of the more powerful person in that. What I mean by powerful is I really could have exerted force.
You had leverage.
I leveraged, and I didn't.
You could have virtually pushed him out.
I could have been I could have been not just unfair, but just cruel. And I didn't want anything to do with that. But what this is weird. What I thought about, I oftentimes try to think things through like my kids' eyes, knowing that I'm even limited to do that because we're all biased. And I'm like, okay, how would I think through this? Like what's fair, what feels good, etc. And I erred on the side of trying to hey, I'll get some sort of relational dividends this way. And I'm really glad I did that. Number one, because I would say that Jeff and I are still friends. We don't talk as often because he has a completely different life. He lives 8 hours away now.
But the relationship was
it enabled the relationship to stabilize and mature in a different way with that. That's great. It also, though, the team got to see me essentially role model.
Yeah.
It enabled trust with all of them because
kind of servant leadership.
When you go through that stuff, like this is an exaggeration, but it was almost like a divorce, right?
Sure.
Like, it's like there's ways to do it well and not.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was good.
And the kids are watching.
And it also, when you lean into making decisions on that, let's just call it based on faith or as much as you can, because to make really good decisions as an owner, sometimes you only have 20 to 30% of the information you think is most relevant to pay attention to. It also strengthens your conviction to continue to prioritize that. And I'm fortunate that, sorry, my throat's getting dry.
It's okay.
Within a relatively short period of time after that, it was very clear to me that we would also be rewarded financially for it after the fact. And so if that hadn't occurred, I would still say it was the right decision, but it was unclear to me at the time that
In the end,
that
it was even a
going to
more right
happen.
decision.
Yeah, and
than the paper looked.
it helped confirm that. You don't always get that confirmation, right? Sometimes you make what you think's the right decision, and you actually pay a price for it. In fact, again, the beauty of the Christian story is that like sometimes that's how you know it's the right decision.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're actually dishonored for doing the right thing like Jesus was. So, and that's a head trip to
No
God
good
down.
deed goes unpunished is a phrase I've used more than a few times.
Yeah. But in this circumstance, that would be it. And I'm really grateful I did that. It's actually given me another thing as a side benefit. When you treat people that way, it instills your hope that you might be treated that way too if the situation were flipped.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of compounding benefits. But at the time, it was not, I could have been tempted to not treat everyone with dignity or whatever.
Sure.
So I'm thankful for that. Particularly young men.
Yeah.
And I would just say that for the men listening to this podcast that feel like they are in a place of abundance in some way, you could make a tremendous difference in the world by choosing to find someone that is not as well established or as well resourced as you, and showing a level of investment in them that's beyond whether they can do anything for you in the future or not.
Yeah.
Because this year, irrespective of politics, they saw, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, killed. And what a lot of young men experienced was someone that I didn't listen to Charlie Kirk. I knew some of Charlie Kirk's stuff, but essentially they saw someone that spoke in a nonviolent way, and the message that some of those men could have internalized is it could have hardened their heart to say, well, it doesn't matter if someone brings a gun. And I think that's a very dangerous thing for young men to experience when there's a lot of people are coping with loneliness, etc. And when men are struggling, the only people that come for them are other men.
Yeah.
And I love women as a group, but for the most part, that's true. Most women do not rescue men that are helpless. It's other men that do that.
Yeah.
And when we do that for one another, not only is it a gift to that man, but it's a gift to us. So I would just be encouraging of that to the extent
whether it's a
that
man or a mentorship relationship with a teenager or
whatever it looks like. I just think that you can get a lot out of that. And what I know that there are a lot of people that are looking for that. And I just would encourage folks to do that if they have something to give, like to lean into that.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking we would do we always do a LoCo Experience, and you've shared a few already, though.
Mm-hmm.
What I was thinking is I wanted to put it on a faith bent a little bit.
Sure.
Do you have kind of a LoCo, a crazy experience as it pertains to providence or your faith or seeing outcomes to prayer or, no speaking in tongues, anything like that in your history, right?
No speaking in tongues.
None of that.
But I will say, I'm coming up off the anniversary of 2 years ago of experiencing a really tremendously painful event. And during that period of time, I basically started the experience of this event on Good Friday. And I, through that, heard the voice of God, and it scared me so much that I thought I was going crazy. That's how painful the experience was. And I'm just really thankful to know that I have a depth of conviction that God is real in a way that would not have been possible without that. And I'm thankful for that, because for so much of my life, even having lost my dad and all those other kind of things, and being so fortunate that I've somehow been blessed enough to know that the suffering I did incur as a kid is able to serve other people through my vocation. Like, thank God for that opportunity, because sometimes people just experience suffering and you're like, why? And I've been gifted with the ability to do that through my work. But I just, to truly know, I'm just thankful for that.
You look back at it as a blessing despite the pain and the challenge.
Well, I would say that I always had the mentality, due to my experience with Viktor Frankl's writing and really the spiritual transformation that God's happened in my life sort of gradually, but I didn't even know what I was missing in terms of the depths of my soul. Meaning at times this experience was so painful that I felt like I had lost every aspect of my identity to the extent that the only thing, there was literally a prayer that I
you
said
hadn't really
at a period of
properly
time.
suffered before.
Yeah, I mean,
Kinda.
You'd think a 15-year-old that loses their dad is proper suffering, but here's the reality. What I'm not here to do is compete on my suffering. What I am here to say is that I have experienced personally many times, and I'm grateful for the reminder that it's oftentimes in our darkest moments that God works in ways that we don't expect.
Yeah.
And it's through our humility and vulnerability that God will show up in ways that we are pleasantly surprised by if we pray for it. And I'm always sensitive to this because I know that inevitably someone out there has probably been hurt by evangelization, and for that I am sorry. And I would just say, please don't let that pain get in the way of whatever your relationship with God needs to look like.
Yeah. You were talking about kind of that dichotomy from fundamentalism to the nothing is real anyway. And I was just reflecting to kind of that season of COVID nation when people were scared at various levels from basically 0 to 100 kind of. And the people that, I mean, not to talk smack or whatever, but the people that didn't freak out as much were the Christians. They were like, this didn't surprise God. And he's got it going on. You know, he's got it figured out. I'll trust.
Yeah, I think when you can truly be held by God, it's a gift. And you can describe it as weakness, vulnerability, whatever it is. I'm not ashamed to admit that. In fact, I'm thankful that I know what it's like to need God and to rely on him.
Yeah.
You know, and to have personally sort of experienced that. And in ways that, like, you know, sometimes you pray for things and you get things that you thought you wanted and you're like, oh boy. There's also things that sometimes when you pray for things and you don't get what you want, but you end up encountering what you need. And I'm just thankful to have personally lived that and have not become bitter or burdened with, I personally experienced healing that can occur that you would think was impossible. And I'm super thankful for that.
Dig that. Well, Clint Jasperson, Purpose-Driven Wealth, fine young man and member of LoCo Think Tank and future author, I suspect. Seems like you've got a book in there somewhere.
Thanks, man.
Eventually.
I appreciate that. You're challenging my humility virtue right now.
Well, AI can write it for you.
Yeah, exactly. My avatar will write it for me.
Great. Yeah. Well, Godspeed. Thanks for coming on again.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kurt Baer, host of the LoCo Experience, and I wanted to let our listeners know that beginning in June of 2026, we're going to be releasing podcast episodes on Wednesday mornings instead of on Saturdays. So we've tested Saturdays for a while. Honestly, we were better on Wednesdays before. So we're heading back to that, and I hope to see you there every Wednesday with a new episode of the LoCo Experience.